I'm a drug addict alcoholic. I'm in recovery now. The idea of one drink never entered my head. I just get hammered all the time. When it comes to heavy rock, no one does it. Like the legendary Prince of Darkness himself, Ozzy Osbourne. Ozzy's antics through the 90s, like ripping off a bat's head with his bare teeth on stage, made it hard for anyone to hold a candle to such sonorous savagery, while Ozzy might have been that guy. Sometimes he just wasn't in the zone, resulting in loud boos to get him off the stage. Why would anyone boo? Ozzy off a stage, is he losing his hold on the dark throne of metal rock? Join us as we discuss Ozzy getting booed off a stage after an upended performance. Ozzy Osbourne's early brush with ethereal music. Ozzy Osbourne's influence on heavy rock music cannot be overstated, even though it wasn't expected. While Nashville had a constellation of stars who focused on soft rock and country music, a Brummy lad born in the dirt, poor tenements of Birmingham born to working-class parents suddenly changed the tide and created a whole new genre, fusing all kinds of music while capturing the hearts and souls all over the United Kingdom. He was soon labeled the Prince of Darkness, owing to his ethereal music. However, it didn't all start that way. My first introduction to movie making. I was on there for about the whole of 33 seconds. I mean, before he became the Prince of Darkness. He was just another Brummy lad with a hesitant Birmingham accent, engaging in blue-collar jobs and hoping for some type of breakthrough. While the allure of entertainment pigeonholed his mindset into music, he had another option that he failed to pursue education. However, he was cut out for much more. Although he finally found himself in music, the trajectory of life wasn't as straight and narrow as others would have had it. He had a real tussle with what he really wanted in life, leading him to blue-collar options like part-time, plumbing and jobs in an auto shop where he worked on car horns and some petty theft, which led him to jail while incarcerated there. Ozzy tattooed the now famous letters O-Z-Z-Y on his left knuckles and happy faces on his knees, using a sewing needle and a graphite slab. Right then, he knew he wasn't cut out for blue-collar jobs or anything of the sort. His distinctive voice and solo career finally paid off with hits like Crazy Train. His first brush with great ethereal music was all thanks to the Beach Boys' first single hit on, which he based his own music. No one hit the stage. Quite like he did with his tattooed knuckles bearing his name. He had the Beatles in his ears all the time, drawing inspiration and preparing for that time when he could change the world of music. This determination had him prepared to take the world on, and devotion absolutely paid off, although he appeared a little bit like a monster on the outside, with the over-the-top makeup and gothic aesthetics. There was much more to him than met the eye. He had that working-class Brummy resilience, which was made obvious during his latter years when he struggled with Parkinson's disease, and a spinal surgery, which many thought would have kept him away from the limelight. He was still there, making the effort to link up with fans and people who followed his career trajectory, while his sudden pivot from dropping out of college at 15 to blue-collar jobs and a life of petty crime led him all the way to musical excellence. The journey to superstardom was no mean feat, although he had chosen music. Just how did it all begin? Ozzy finds his calling Black Sabbath. Since the early 60s, the United Kingdom's pop culture has always placed the Beatles at the pinnacle of rock music, and Ozzy definitely agrees. In 1963, the Beatles had their first hit single, She Loves You, a song that turned heads and hearts, steering them in one direction. Ozzy was only 14 at the time and was turning 15 that same year. It was as though he were struck by lightning, just listening to the artistry on that guitar, like a man possessed. he had suddenly found religion. It was going to be a rock star. So in the late 1960s, he joined up with Geezer Butler's first band, Rare Breed, and was recruited as a singer. After their first 2 shows, the band broke up with so much testosterone and egos clashing. However, Butler and Ozzy reconnected again, creating the Polka Talk Blues alongside Tony, Lammy, and Bill Ward. It was time for one last hurrah. While they wrote songs and commandeered stages, they grew in leaps and bounds, and this growth also seeped into their names. They figured that they needed a simpler and more intricately connected name, so they chose Earth, however, after being accidentally booked for a show instead of another band. With the same name, they decided to change their name again, finally settling on Black Sabbath in August 1969, having tried his hand at all types of blue-collar jobs and petty theft as an insane kicker to get things up a notch. Quite a weird story behind this book. When I decided to write the story about myself, Ozzy found himself in music. It was the 1960s, just 15 years after the Second World War. The disillusionment in the world was real, and different forms of avant-garde arts seemed to pacify people more than pre-war arts. Hence Ozzy and other members of the band discovered how much it blew people's minds to see them dressed in black, their dark, gloomy Gothic aesthetic, paired with their heavy blues music, laced with some seriously sad lyrics, and deliberately voiced with sonorous despair. Had everyone's attention, there is an urban legend that Butler read an occult book while they were recording their first album. In a fit of fear, he woke up to a dark figure by his bed. Whether that was some figment of his imagination that seemed like reading an occult book, or an actual manifestation of his genre, coming to life, no one knew. However, one thing was. For sure, it was the perfect spur to egg them on. Once he told Ozzy about it, they drew inspiration from it, and curated the lyrics to Black Sabbath, their first song on that album, and this time it was much darker than anything Ozzy had put out in the past. It was the perfect dosage of fear, laced with enough doom and gloom for fans who wanted to chase that high. While their music prowess was not to be doubted, they needed a record label to push this unique genre to superstardom enter, Warner Bravo, so sad de fi and de fiera. Sakami some just how impactful was Ozzy and Black Sabbath, signing with Warner Brothers. Ozzy signs with Warner Brothers, a pact with the devil, while rock music was already a thing. Before the Black Sabbath band was introduced to the world, Ozzy had a different breed of music on his mind. Something influenced by the dark tones of the blue scales, and the slow heftiness of rock music slightly, amped up by daring lyrics that caused the hair on the back of anyone's neck to rise. Soon, Warner Brothers saw this new fusion of music starting to make the rounds, and gathering a following like never seen before. Hence, just like every perfect record label boss who knew the first thing about never getting late to the party, the upper echelon of Warner Brothers came knocking and asked that they put pen to paper on a deal that promises them a way to bring their shadowy music into the sun. Limelight Ozzy believed that they had found the perfect devil to sell their gothic heavy rock music, and had no doubts about the record label's marketing prowess. So he convinced the band to sign under Warner Brothers. It really was the beginning of something new. Their style of music was something no one else had seen, heard, or done before. Yet it sounded pretty familiar. The reason was simple. They were creating a new genre of music called heavy rock or metal music. It was a different kind of vibe, as it needed a wee bit of everything familiar to sound different. The difference between Zakk Wylde and Jackie Lee's like night and day. And the ghost goes. Just imagine rock music laced with a bit of blues. Music and a specific type of singing. It was more than music. It became a movement influencing other bands like Metallica and Iron Maiden. While Warner Brothers saw the potential in their music, they invested modestly from the start. However, they were met with unbelievable success. The band's success was built around Ozzy's raspy singing, Tony Iommi's eerie guitar riffs, Bill Ward's dark tempo drum beats, and Geezer Butler's writing skills. They were the perfect blend of musical ingenuity and gothic aesthetics that kept both ears and eyes in the groove, while their ethereal music gained popularity in the United States with their eponymous debut album, Black Sabbath, and their second album, Paranoid. Gaining unprecedented commercial success, they found it hard to reach the female demographic in the United States, not just as a band, but personally, especially Ozzy, who fell in love with Sharon Arden. But she deemed him crazy at first. Who could blame her? He had his stage costumes on and all the gothic feel. Just wasn't really rubbing off women at the time, although things went swimmingly well at first. Soon they started to face challenges. How did they get through it? The Black Sabbath's challenges, having released their first 2 albums and received some serious critical acclaim for them. They thought that they had found the formula for success in a new genre and expected to be accepted. However, that wasn't the case. Just 5 months after releasing Paranoid, the band released Master of Reality. It didn't take long for the album to top charts in the United Kingdom and the United States, with a gold certification knocking on their doors. Within 2 months of release, it was the best body of work that they had ever released at. The time in the 1980s, the album received its first platinum certification and went double platinum in the early 21st century, although they made commercial sales. Some just couldn't accept them. They represented everything. Each culture of music that was warped into the heavy rock sound hated it was too loud and fast to be rock or pop. Yet the lyrics were too loose to be referred to as blues music. Hence, it was little to no surprise that some of the gatekeepers of these musical ideologies had a special disdain for Black Sabbath. Not like they cared anyway, but the reviews were there, and they saw them. Blues music has always had a sad purity to it, with the guitar riffs voicing every pain and hurt in the guitarist's heart. This wit and cunning, added to the music, gave it a sense of purity and sanity. All I am is a conductor of mayhem. I like to see people get off in a good way. However, Black Sabbath habitually played with a deliberate downturn and slurred effects on the guitar pedal to sound a riff that delved into a more gloomy and shadowy world. Lester Bangs, a music journalist for Rolling Stone magazine, doubled down on how bad and corrupting the influence of Black Sabbath's Master of Reality was. In his words, he described it as simplistic, repetitive, and an absolute doggerel. While Ozzy saw this criticism of his band being aired out on mainstream media, they never lost focus. They kept the grind going. They were making real sales as more people in the 70s had begun to find a place for this new genre of rock music. Together, they released some more albums, like Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, the album that gave them their first rave reviews in mainstream media. Now they not only had the listening ears of regular people to whom their projects were sold, but also the attention and heart of mainstream media, giving them props for the first time. It was the best body of work that they had ever released. At the time, the success of Sabbath Bloody Sabbath spurred them on to create more masterpieces, like Sabotage in July 1975, which Rolling Stone once described as their best ever album. However, it wasn't long before the group was dismissed. Just how did that happen? Booze, breakdown, dismissal, and a solo career. Black Sabbath were doing so well in the 70s, with off-the-charts numbers and sales, and insane stage performances that set the crowd on fire as they got soaked in these heavy rock songs. However, the light of fame shone too brightly, and substance misuse became a part of their routine, sending them over the edge. Sometimes it was basic over-the-counter pills, and other times they kicked it up a notch with unspeakable substances, while downing the strongest liquor they could find. It wasn't a one-man problem. All four of them, including Tony Loomy, Bill Ward, Ozzy, and Butler, just couldn't give up the high, and they found it incredibly hard to do. Hence, Ozzy left and formed a solo band pursuing a project he called the Blizzard of Oz. However, it wasn't long before he reconnected with his mates at Black Sabbath. Upon his return, they tried to get back in the studio, hoping to cook up another tune that would put them on the map again to ever, during the 5 months they spent together at Sounds Interchange Studios in Toronto, where they recorded their next album at the time, Never Say Die. The substance misuse problem got even worse. For some reason, they were always drunk or high on some illegal substance and unable to work together, as everyone played or sang something different from whatever they should have been doing. So it became a habit to wrap it up and go again. The next day, I learned right more about Jack than I ever did when he was living at home. Yeah, when they would get drunk and high again and remain unproductive. Soon, Tony Looney couldn't take it anymore, so he took control and snapped out of it as quickly as possible, calling the rest to order and trying to figure out a way past their accesses. Although they finally got it together, Ozzy and Loomy didn't see eye to eye anymore. The former claimed that he was being asked to record his vocals repeatedly, and that Loomy manipulated them, so he needed to do it again every time. As for Lamy, he just couldn't take Ozzy's continuous drinking, so he called him out and asked the rest of the band to vote him out, which they happily obliged. However, Ozzy wasn't fazed. Instead, he took his solo career even more seriously in 1979. With his father-in-law's help, he formed the Blizzard of Oz band, featuring drummer Lee Kerslake, bassist-lyricist Bob Daisley, keyboardist Don Erie of Rainbow, and later Deep Purple, and guitarist Randy Rhoads, and the rest, as they say, is history as the years rolled by and Ozzy got older. His chokehold on the heavy rock genre started to wane. Just how did he react to this decline? The Prince of Darkness loses his applause while being a musical. Genius was one of Ozzy's greatest strengths. It wasn't the only one. He was a genius. At stage performances, he just knew how to make everyone eat right out of his palm. He wasn't the musician to simply listen to, as anyone would pay to watch him perform. Speaking of performance, nothing seems to top his Bat Fiesta. In 1982, Ozzy, as usual, was on stage, serenading the fans with his music and allure, until something outworldly happened. As expected in a gothic setting for heavy rock, somebody came with a live, bat threw it on stage, and the Prince of Darkness bit its head right off, while these antics were an important part of his art. Sometimes they bordered on the extreme. However, his drinking problems spoke volumes. In the 70s, leading to his complete departure from Black Sabbath, his life had always been a minefield of malapropisms, where things just don't seem as they are for a grand context. He was born to a Catholic mother, albeit not a practicing one. She still named him John, and Michael, meaning that he was taught the ways of Christianity as a child. Yet he chose to get his inspirations from the dark, gloomy feel of the occult, together with Geezer Butler. His upbringing made it hard for anyone to see why devil music became an important part of his aesthetics and performances. However, the thing about creating a new sound in music is that it could also be easily replaced by another beautiful melting of the sounds, formed into an explosive cocktail of good music. But Ozzy didn't see it that way, as he kept his sound and his belief. But time does have a way of making everything ephemeral. Soon years and years of lengthy stage performance, substance misuse, and a life that teetered between musical ingenuity and self-destruction was now about to take a damning toll. The Prince of Darkness, who used to prowl stages like a demon on a mission covered in mascara, and with a mic wrapped around his hands, now suddenly needed help to leave the stage during the Diary of a Madman tour. Ozzy Osbourne collapsed on stage after singing the first line of Over the Mountain at the Assembly Hall in Champaign, Illinois. On January 26th, the crowd fell silent, watching him get dragged all the way out of the hall by his wife Sharon, while some continued to applaud him as he left the stage. Others booed him, blaming him, and him only for his predicament. And just like that, he slowly lost the applause that he had grown accustomed to throughout his celebrity lifestyle. However, nostalgia is a strong feeling, and it has found its way back into pop culture, with Metallica and other heavy rock bands, who created a farewell show for Ozzy Osbourne, and Black Sabbath, marking their final performance together. After 20 years, do you think Ozzy Osbourne still has a claim to the heavy rock throne? Is there a chance that he could stage a comeback and take over again? Share your thoughts with us in the comment section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video. Showing on your screen, you will enjoy it.